So I sent 10 songs through, and they was all finna be on my album because I didn't want nobody to steal my shit because I know how people move. So boom, the one they took a liking to was the intro. Now the intro still dropped. I said, no, you can't have this song. He wanted me on his album still. He said, I'm gonna send you a verse through. Never sent a verse. I didn't give a fuck till I just went and listened to Iceman, and I listened to Little Birdie, and then I went back and listened to the intro of my first album. Twin. That's the only beat I've ever produced and sat there and produced. Don't rip my shit and repitch it like that, fam. That's fried. That's fried out and fucked up.
I didn't want anyone to take since I know how people move, so I sent 10 tracks that would all be on my album. Thus, boom. The introduction was the one they found appealing. The intro still dropped at this point. He still wanted me on his album, so I told him, no, you can't have this song. I'm going to send you a verse through, he claimed, but he never sent the verse. I didn't give until I went to listen to Iceman, Little Birdie, and then my first album's intro, Twins. That's the only beat I've ever created while sitting down to generate music. Family, please don't rip my underscore and repitch it that way. It's fried. That's up and fried out. Drake stole a song by the Ragtime Gents from 1900. The one song he informed Drake's camp they couldn't have, the beat this man made himself, was put on a big album release as if no one would notice. And now that the 1900 Rugrat has made it public, Drake needs to react. Before we continue, you guys need to grasp things. This isn't your typical industry conflict. This isn't of two rappers fighting over a publishing split or producer credits. This is a 21-year-old kid from Limestone Creek, Florida, a town with barely 1,000 residents. He finally made his breakthrough, got his chance, and was co-signed by the biggest artist in the business. Then, he turned around and saw that same artist allegedly reach back into his bag, take the one song he specifically rejected, repitch the beat, and slide it onto Iceman as if nothing had happened. Here's why this tale goes beyond Drake and 1900 Rugrats. This is nothing new for this man. He has an unquestionable, recorded, and receipted practice of appropriating the sounds, flows, and actual written bars of smaller musicians and passing them off as his own. It was stated by XXXTentacion. It was demonstrated by Meek Mill. The Weeknd acknowledged it. Reference tracks for Future were leaked. Lil Yachty was mentioned. One of the first things out of the gate on the album Drake launched to purportedly restore his legacy after being destroyed by Kendrick Lamar is a young Florida artist taking to Instagram and declaring, "That's my shot." Let me explain it to you all right from the start. Before we delve into the alleged actions of Drake, it is important to understand who this man is. If you don't see the 1900 Rugrat story, you won't be able to comprehend why this situation was so different. Miles Spiel was born in Limestone Creek, Florida, a small community in Palm Beach County, on August 8, 2003. There are slightly more than 1,000 people living there. I truly grew up in a place so small that its primary claim to fame is a nature preserve. His biological parents are unknown to him. At the age of 2 weeks, he was adopted. Then, at the age of 14, he was expelled by his adoptive parents. Not a cap. A 14-year-old in South Florida's streets. He moved in with Rick, a Creek family acquaintance. You may have heard that same Rick on his recording. Rugrat began rapping because he believed he could outperform a student who was performing in front of him. Traditional origin story, family. He had no desire to become well-known. He was only being himself. Everyone misjudged the wild youngster, the class clown. He worked at Walmart and Tijuana Flats for years, but he was never able to hold down a job for longer than 4 months at a time. He recorded in his boy's room using a computer and a Turtle Beach video game headset while listening to Chief Keef, Kodak Black, YNW Melly, XXXTentacion, and all the Florida legends and drill influences that shaped his sound. For years, he was posting freestyles on SoundCloud with very few plays. Then, when he released One Take Freestyle in September 2024, it went horribly wrong. It rose to the top of Spotify's US viral list in a matter of weeks. All of a sudden, brands began calling. The man suddenly moved from a veranda in Limestone Creek to the 50th floor after signing with Remain Solid and 300 Entertainment. From true poverty to wealth. When his debut tape, Porch to the Pen, was released on February 28, 2025, the cosigns flooded in. He was praised by Kodak Black, Lil Yachty, and Lil Uzi Vert. He went on tour with Boss Man Dlo. He gave performances at Rolling Loud California and Rolling Loud Miami. His style was described as fully formed by the New York Times. He was selected as an artist to watch by the Fader. Then Drake himself reposted him, which was the one that truly propelled him into a new realm. Drake was on tour in Australia in February 2025, just after Kendrick won the Grammy Awards with Not Like Us. A bass-boosted remix of 1900Rugrat's one-take freestyle can be heard in the background of his Instagram reel, which saw him performing live while sporting a sweatshirt with fake bullet holes in it and smoke effects. Rugrat's claimed that when he watched it, he practically shook his girl awake. The biggest cosign of his life was, "Baby, Drake posted about me." It rocked his head, he told Complex. He expressed his panic to the Fader. Drake's shout-out to his tens of millions of followers means the world to a 21-year-old lad from a village of 1,000. Imagine what it must have been like for him to listen to Drake's latest record and feel as though that same man had simply reached into his suitcase and taken something without asking. This is the insane part. Drake's staff had already communicated with 1900Rugrat prior to all of this, including the co-signing, the Grammy moment, and the viral post. This communication went beyond simply praising his music. It has to do with getting it. In his Instagram video, Rugrat claims that one of Drake's producers contacted him about a year and a half before to the release of Iceman, requesting to hear unreleased songs. Now consider what that implies. It wasn't a fan's direct message. This wasn't a fishing trip with some A&R. A Florida rapper who wasn't well known at the time was approached directly by Drake's producer and asked for music. 10 songs were submitted to them via Rugrat. 10 unreleased records, all reserved for his own CD. In the video, he said, "Keep this part in your memory because it's crucial." He sent them specifically knowing how people in this industry move. He wasn't naive. He was watching his back. "I didn't want anybody to steal my, because I know how people move." And what happened? So I sent 10 songs through, and they were all going to be on my album because I didn't want anybody to steal my, because I know how people move. Drake's team listened to all 10 tracks, and the intro was the one they liked. He said, "No, you can't have this song." I told him, "No, you can't have this song." The intro was the one they liked, but it still dropped. He kept it, put it on his own debut tape, and released it on February 28, 2025, as the opening track of Porch to the Pent. That beat, the only one he's ever produced himself, sat there and, made from scratch, became the intro to his first real project. Then, on May 15, 2026, Iceman, Habibti, and Maid of Honor, a total of 43 songs, are released at midnight during the 4th installment of Drake's Iceman livestream series. He pulls out 3 hard drives on camera, and the internet goes crazy. It's the biggest release Drake has done in years, his first solo studio album since 2023's For All the Dogs, and his first true statement album since Kendrick Lamar buried him with Not Like Us. Everyone goes to listen, including 1900Rugrat's. "Twin, that's the only beat I've ever produced and sat down and made myself. Don't rip my and repitch it like that." So, I just went and listened to Iceman, and I listened to Little Birdie, and then I went back and listened to the intro of my first album. "Twin, that's the only beat I've ever produced and sat down and produced with." For those in the back, let me reiterate that this is the only beat he has ever created himself. It's not a beat someone else made or a loop he stole from the internet, and he's claiming that Drake took it, pitched it differently, and put it on Iceman, an album that's being credited as Drake's comeback moment, as if it belonged to him. And here's the thing. The song Little Birdie is listed as written and composed solely by Drake. Reddit threads were created in a matter of hours after the release. The TikTok timeline exploded, fan accounts began to clip the 2 songs side by side, and YouTube breakdowns began to appear, and this is where things get even more complicated because this wasn't just a random accusation from a little-known artist trying to chase off a big album drop. This was a man with receipts, a man who could point to the documented communication between himself and Drake's production team. A man who released his own song months before Iceman and could literally play them. Back to back, fam. His song was released on February 28, 2025, and Drake's purported version appears on Iceman on May 15, 2026. That's the chronology. That's how the dots connect. Now, People started making even more connections because this wasn't the first time Drake had been in this exact situation. And this is where the story goes from a one-on-one dispute to a full-on pattern that the culture has been watching play out for years. In January 2017, while on his Boy Meets World tour in Amsterdam, Drake releases a new song from his upcoming More Life project called KMT, featuring UK rapper Giggs. The song is leaked online through a fan recording at the show, and within hours, XXXTentacion and his fan base start making noise. Why? Because Look at Me had just become one of the most popular songs on SoundCloud. At the time, X was incarcerated in Broward County, which is literally 1900Rugrat's universe. The flow that Drake's team went public with right away, and his manager, Adam22, acknowledged that he had considered both possibilities. And keep it real, I felt it was kind of ridiculous to say that you've never heard of him, his associate Danny Towers stated on camera. If Drake is going to take the flow, at least reach out to Anaya and help Anaya in this situation. Does that sound familiar? Because 1900Rugrat's complaint is almost exactly the same energy. You have the access to hit me up. You hit me up. You asked for the music. I said no, and you went ahead and did it anyway. The difference between X's and Rugrat's situations is actually more damning for Drake in the Rugrat case. No cap. With X, the argument was about flow and cadence, things that are harder to legally pin down, even if they're morally clear. With Rugrat, we're allegedly talking about the actual beat, an instrumental, a production, the kind of thing that has a clearer legal and ethical line around it. In Drake's response to X back then, he denied everything publicly, said on BBC Radio 1 Extra that he didn't know what anybody was talking about, played it off, and that was that because X was in jail young and didn't have the institutional support to push it further. The beef became part of the narrative around X. It boosted X's profile, his associates later admitted, but Drake never got properly held accountable. Are we watching the same playbook again? Now gang, let's talk about the full picture because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. In June 2015, Meek Mill posted a series of tweets that changed the hip-hop discourse for years. He accused Drake of not writing his own raps. That sparked the biggest ghostwriting controversy hip-hop had seen in a generation. Reference tracks surfaced, audio recordings of an Atlanta rapper named Quentin Miller performing the exact same verses that ended up on Drake's songs. Near identical delivery, near identical cadences, song after song. And the reference tracks from 10 bands, Know Yourself, and other key records had Miller's voice on them doing the verses in almost exactly the way Drake would perform them. Now Drake's camp called Miller a collaborator, not a ghostwriter, but the distinction was paper-thin when you listened to those recordings. The deeper layer that people often miss is what NPR pointed out at the time. The most important part of rap isn't just the words on paper. It's the cadence, the flow, the melody, and how a bar sounds. And if someone else is laying that out in a reference track, essentially performing what the final product is going to sound like, then what exactly is left for the credited artist to do? That's the uncomfortable question Drake has never fully answered. And it didn't stop there. The Weeknd, back when he was broke and hungry, admitted to Rolling Stone in 2015 that he gave songs to Drake for Take Care that were originally intended for his own House of Balloons mixtape. He said it himself, "I gave up almost half my album." He expressed gratitude to Drake for drawing attention to him. But the statement he made years later, when he and Drake were at odds, revealed the truth. "I thank God that I never signed my life away." People don't discuss the Oval Trap enough. Artists in Drake's immediate vicinity give up music, songs, and sounds early in their careers, sometimes out of appreciation, sometimes due to pressure, and sometimes just because Drake has the reach and they're trying to eat. And Drake records such tracks with little credit and no discussion. Then there's Future's reference tracks that leaked during the 2024 beef era, and Vori and Lil Yachty. Rick Ross literally trolled Drake during the beef by posting a video captioned Yachty aka The Pen. The reference tracks began to appear, including Yachty's voice on verses that would later become Drake's albums. The cadence, the music, the delivery, and the entire blueprint were purportedly written by Yachty. This suggests that Yachty was composing for Drake. Iceman was supposed to be Drake's comeback after Kendrick Lamar bodied him with Not Like Us in May 2024, a song that went on to win Record of the Year and Song of the Year at the 2026 Grammys, the first diss track in history to win a Grammy, and was performed live for 133.5 million viewers at the Super Bowl halftime show. That doesn't exist in a vacuum. It lands on top of a very long book. Legally, Kendrick walked. Culturally, Kendrick walked. The entire world had witnessed it. Drake had to react, and he did so in the only way he knew how. 3 albums at once, 43 songs, music videos debuting during a live stream, an ice sculpture that raised safety concerns in Toronto. After months of teasers, the Iceman rollout was supposed to be a coronation, his reclamation, and his declaration that he was still here, still standing, still the biggest, regardless of what happened in 2024. However, within hours of the release, one of the first big stories going around wasn't about the diss tracks directed at DJ Khaled, Kendrick, or LeBron James, but rather about 1900Rugrat taking to Instagram and saying, "You stole my intro, and I told you you couldn't have it." Consider how that appears from 1900Rugrat's point of view. That's a PR nightmare on what should have been Drake's biggest day of the year, at the very least. This man co-signed for you. You posted him. You used his music to support the most symbolic moment of your post-beef tour. You, in your bullet hole hoodie, defiantly, with Rugrat's voice echoing through the arena. You used his music to represent your strength, and then you allegedly went and took his music without payment, without credit, and without permission. That's a violation of trust from the person who showed you the most love at your lowest point. Here's what everyone is waiting to hear. Drake hasn't publicly addressed 1900Rugrat's claims. And that silence is doing a lot of talking because Drake has few options. He can deny it, but that would be an admission that the credit wasn't there when it should have been. He can settle it quietly behind the scenes, which is the most likely outcome if lawyers are already talking. Rugrat might be legally prevented from ever addressing it publicly again, or he can ignore it completely, as he did with XXXTentacion in 2017, and wait for the news cycle to move on. However, the internet in 2026 is different from 2017. What we do know is that 1900Rugrat isn't backing down. He didn't couch this as a question or say, "I think this sounds similar." The streets have been talking about this since Iceman dropped, and the longer Drake keeps mute, the louder that conversation gets. "That's the only beat I ever produced and sat there and made myself," he stated bluntly. "Don't take my underscore and repitch it in that manner." That's a statement from a man who understands the sound of his invention and doesn't consider any ambiguity. And 1900Rugrat is not some unknown trying to gain influence. Rather, he is a 21-year-old artist who built his entire brand on being real, being himself, and being unfiltered. Crying Wolf would go against everything he stands for. Let me zoom out for a moment because this situation is bigger than Drake and 1900Rugrat. What we're witnessing is a conversation about power in the music industry that hip-hop has been having for decades. Smaller artists are drawn into your orbit. They share unreleased records. They are thankful, music, for the exposure, the cosign, and the repost. And in the process of being thankful, they occasionally lose their creations to the machine. That's not new, but what's evolving is the ability to document it, expose it, and hold people accountable in real time. In 2017, XXXTentacion was literally in jail and lacked the platform, support, or legal resources to really pursue Drake. The comparison still resonated with fans and became part of his legend. But Justice is a different story. He's signed to a real label. He's got a documented paper trail of communication with Drake's camp. He's got a fan base that's awake and paying attention. He's got the original beat he made himself, and he has the self-awareness to know that his silence would be interpreted as acceptance. The reality is this. Drake's brand has always been built partly on authenticity, the confessional bars, the personal storytelling, and the idea that this is a man who lives his music, who writes from his soul, who creates from a real place. Every single allegation of ghostwriting or biting or stealing, from Meek Mill in 2015 all the way to 1900Rugrat in 2026, chips away at that foundation one piece at a time. Not enough to bring the whole thing down, but enough to change the way the culture reads him. And now, on the album he specifically made to restore his reputation, one of the most discussed tracks out of 43 is being claimed by a 21-year-old kid from Limestone Creek, Florida, who never even wanted to be in this situation. He just wanted his intro back. Real recognizes real, gang, and the streets recognize that what 1900 Rugrat described in that Instagram video, the direct communication, the specific song being requested, the specific refusal, and the alleged use of it anyway, is not the behavior of someone who respects the culture. Here's where it gets crazy. Drake is in the most vulnerable position he's been in since before his first album. He's trying to win back a culture that just watched Kendrick Lamar perform Not Like Us at the Super Bowl. He's trying to prove he can create without controversy, without legal battles, without the narrative of artificiality that has followed him since Meek first opened that box in 2015. Instead of emerging from the Iceman rollout unscathed, a 21-year-old rapper from Florida is saying, "Don't rip my shit." The way Drake reacts to this, if he reacts at all, will reveal a lot about his current state as a man and an artist. This is because how you handle being called out on your timing is what separates a legend from a liability, and Drizzy's timing couldn't be worse right now. Please leave a comment below. Do you think Drake stole Rugrat's beat, or is this just a coincidence? Have you listened to both songs back to back? If so, you can decide for yourself. If you believe Drake has been doing this since the beginning, at least since the XXXTentacion era, hit the like button because the culture needs to continue recording this pattern. I'm out. Continue to be risky.